Um, my mom talks about the fights that she had with
Your
Mary
mom
here and
talked with
there.
the fight? Your mom talked with the fight?
She doesn't talk about every single one of them. She just talks about a couple of them, but I actually remember a lot of the fights or arguments that she would have. I remember there was one in particular that won't get into crazy details about because um, I don't know if all the parties involved would be okay with it. But Mary, she was a little bit too verbally harsh on one of my siblings, and it was bad. That sibling ended up crying a ton, and they were really sad and they were really hurt, and they went and told my mom about it. And it was in the Lehigh house, and so my mom walked straight upstairs into Mary's apartment, confronted Mary, and that was like the second time that Mary and my mom had had a big, like, don't talk to my kids again kind of thing, which I was very grateful for because it kind of lessened a lot of the struggle and strife that I was feeling and the backlash that I was feeling. So I was like, yes, finally, make something happen, take her away.
Hi, besties. Okay. Christine Brown and Mary Brown's tenuous relationship is a big talking point right now. And McKelty Padron addressed aspects of this that were described in the book by her mother. And she spoke about her own experiences with Mary. McKelty pointed out that she was always a little bit different than the rest of her siblings and that she received a lot of the brunt of Mary and her wrath, although Mary didn't always discriminate and apparently also took things out on other siblings. So it wasn't just McKelty. McKelty, in fairness, when I believe she says that she was different than her siblings, she did disclose aspects of her self on her Patreon, and this was when she was older and in high school. But when she was older in high school, in Vegas, she was a wild girl. I mean, she was a party girl. She shared a story about how when she was in high school, she was invited to this party and she got way too tipsy and her mom had to pick her up, and her mom would just pick her up anytime she was tipsy, and that was never talked about on the show, by the way. But McKelty was more of a creative. I think she was more of a rebel and maybe pushed back a little bit on the rules of the cult, and she was more creative in what she wanted to wear. She wanted to wear less modest clothing, but that I don't think was any less different than any of the other older girls. Maddie also wanted to wear shorter skirts, and by shorter skirts I mean like right above the knee. But in fairness, she addressed aspects of the book where she said that it was nice for her mom to actually bring this up and write about it. This isn't the first time that Christine has wrote about it, and I thought Christine wrote about a incident that she claimed happened in Lehigh that she and Mary got into a big fight about, and she said that that was one of the moments where it was over. But McKelty said that there was several of these types of fights, so I don't think there was like one moment. I don't think it's one crystal clear issue. And honestly, if I were to put myself in their shoes, I'm a mom. I only have one child, but I don't like anyone yelling at my kid. I don't even like to yell at my kid. I don't like harsh discipline. I'm not someone that does discipline. I'm more of a let's redirect, like let's find something else to do. Unless the behavior is something that, we need to have a talk about. But beyond that, like I just don't believe in corporal punishment or we never did timeouts. We rarely ever have to yell, and so when I read about, these disagreements that they're having about their kids, I think it would be hard. There's a lot of kids, there wasn't a lot of money, and you're having to deal with your rivals' children, which would make things even worse. And that your rival is your sister wife, who you're supposed to be in a, loving relationship, but you're not. And Christine in the book writes about how she's like the kind of mom that doesn't like to have too many rules, which is fine. I don't have a lot of rules as a mom either. But she was all about like kids need to be kids. If kids want to jump on the bed, I'm fine with them jumping on the bed. If kids want to go through the cupboards and play with the Tupperware, I'm fine with that. But that was like not anything that Mary was okay with. Mary wanted her house to be a certain way and she didn't want kids to be rowdy. And there were times on the show where sometimes Christine's son was out of control or really mean to like the little girls. And Christine really didn't do anything about it. So if I put myself in the position of Mary and you see that happening and she's not going to say anything, that puts her in an uncomfortable situation too. So I'm not discounting that things happened in this house. I just think that when you have parenting problems and you have other parents trying to step in and parent your kids, there's always going to be a conflict because nobody wants anyone to tell their kid what to do. Like, don't boss my kid around, don't speak to my kid like that. I mean, that brings out the mama bear in all of us, right? I remembered a clip from the honeymoon episode that I just wanted to show you quick as an example of what I'm talking about.
Work, get up.
Yay!
Don't give me a roar off my spot.
Other spot.
Thanks to you. I like the spot I was in.
You don't get it.
Why not?
Because there's that spot there.
That's my spot.
Hayden picks on the girls sometimes, which I don't know. One side I'm kind of like, oh, that means they're integrating really well because he's treating them like sisters. And that's horrible.
I understand that like there's this dynamic between brothers and sisters. Listen, I'm a little sister and I understand what it's like to have an older brother. And I understand what it's like to have family members that are boys, like cousins and such. And I know what it's like to be the picked on little girl and bullied little girl. And I've always hated the whole boys will be boys and the idea that like a boy picks on a girl because he likes her. I think that's a horrible message to send little boys. And so there were definitely times when I would watch the show, and that's just one example. There was another episode when they all went camping and Peyton was bothering Brianna. And Brianna is like several years younger than Peyton. And one of the boys like poked Brianna in the eye and basically were just like bullying her. They were. And Mary had to yell at the kids and told them to knock it off. And Christine got so mad at her about that because she felt like it wasn't the time or the place for Mary to address it. But there's certainly times when certain behaviors by a child are just never going to be acceptable, and physical violence is never okay. I know that some people are okay with their kids hitting and fighting and such. I grew up like that and I have a lot of trauma from that. And so I don't think it's cool. I don't think it doesn't need to be natural. It doesn't need to be something that all kids do. It's a learned behavior. And I know in the case for me, it was a learned behavior because it's what we saw our parents do to us. And so if you have people, if you're hitting your kids, you're going to hit your siblings, you know? So there were definitely times throughout the seasons that I thought, you know, if no one's going to step in and correct the kids, is Peyton just allowed to run amok and foul and be awful to his siblings? Is it okay that Janelle's sons are all beating the crap out of each other on television and giving each other bloody noses? You know, that's the difference, I think, is that Mary didn't like that kind of behavior. And that's not to say that she didn't maybe cross lines. I just think when you have two polar opposite views on parenting and you don't agree, there's going to be discrepancies. And I also think that kids that have parents that are less strict and more laid back are going to gravitate towards that person because they can get more of what they want from that parent, right? And so if you're the parent that has to be the hard ass or the one that draws the line in the sand, it's not fair all the time that you have to be that way if the other parent's not going to do their responsibility. So I can see where, on the one hand, Mary causes trauma, but then I can also see, on the other hand, that maybe the loose style of parenting contributed to behavior in the home that was not fair or kind to other people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that all of her rules were malicious. by any means. I don't think it was hatred. I don't think it was, I just hate Christine, so I'm going to take it out on her kids. I think it's just very different styles in what they expect and what is okay and what's not okay. And Mary really didn't like when the kids were being mean to the other kids. She did not find that acceptable.
I was standing there and all of a sudden Brianna comes up to me and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. She goes, Peyton hit me in the eye. So we've had some problems with Peyton and Garrison picking on my little kids.
Dad! Kids have been doing this way too long, way too much, and something needed to be said now. Guys, these are your brothers and sisters whether you like it or not, and you better start treating them like it.
There were numerous times when they were all together as family where the kids would act out. And I'm compassionate to the kids because these children were forced onto a reality show where they were forced to integrate with a new family. Their dad was with a younger wife, bringing in 3 unknown children. And then they were said, you need to be brothers and sisters and everything needs to be fine. And it didn't really appear like, on the show at least, there was a really solid attempt to integrate the kids beyond filming together on a show. And I read Christine's book, and from her perspective, her kids felt abandoned and they felt that they had a dad prior to Robin, and then after Robin came along, he disappeared. And that's painful for children. And it's probably very confusing because at the same time, they're also filming a show with them and they see what their dad is doing with them and it hurts. And if you're in a dysfunctional family, you're going to react in a dysfunctional way. And when you don't have parents around trying to help remedy those thoughts and those feelings, and there's so much energy that's being focused around the jealousy the wives are experiencing from one another competing, it's really the kids that get the raw deal out of this. I think a lot about how much the wives throughout all of the seasons spent so much time being upset with one another and frustrated with Cody that I kept thinking it's at the expense of all of this quality time that could have been spent developing and loving these kids. And it's sad. This isn't a video to go at Christine. It's more just to say that in a dynamic like this, there's no winners. There's no winners. Christine is not a winner. Mary's not a winner, but really the kids are not winners. The kids are reacting the way kids react. And sometimes when a brain is not fully developed, it's that explosive reaction of throwing things, kicking things, punching. If you're jealous of someone, it might be poking their eye. I mean, Peyton's a big kid. He was a notorious bully in that family. And even Gwendolyn won't speak to him because he would get physical with her too. And Gwendolyn has called him the most abusive in the family. So she thinks it's critical for Peyton to, call Mary out. And until someone in this family actually says Mary hit someone, I don't believe it, because there's a lot of talk about Mary yelling, which I understand is awful. But at the same time, it's like just a byproduct of this culture, right? So on the one hand, I understand why Mary probably felt frustrated. On the other hand, I also feel like, okay, I get why Christine felt frustrated. And then my logical brain is like, well, if you just weren't in polygamy, this wouldn't be a problem, right? And McKelty, when she was on her Patreon, was talking about how she has so much trauma from living with Mary because of how strict Mary was and how awful Mary was and how Mary would belittle her and her mom.
Not the only time where we had a candy store money incident. There were many other incidents growing up where I was not treated kindly by Mary. Very, very many things. And so she talks about how after that incident, she had a talk with Mary, and she told Mary she didn't want to have anything to do with her, and she was done. It wasn't that one thing. It was a compounding effect. It had been built up and there were multiple occurrences. And what's sad is even though she told my mom, we're done, I don't want to be really around. We're married to the same man and we're just going to leave it at that. Leona will always be my child, but that's all I want to have anything to do with you, essentially. It was still years where Mary would still be very present in our lives. The house was really cool, but because of it was more suppressed memories. I suppressed more memories living there simply because of, trauma. Honestly, that's like what it was. So
I don't know what happened in these houses. It seems like there were a lot of disagreements about child rearing, and it would be very hard for Mary as the first wife dealing with infertility and dealing with her husband acting a fool and then having to deal with his kids from another wife. I think that would make even the most sane person insane and act horrible. That's not to say it's an excuse. It's just a byproduct of polygamy. And I I feel so badly for these kids because Christine obviously didn't want Mary around her kids, but then they lived again with her in West Jordan, then they lived again with her in Lehigh. She was always around Mary, and the kids were always around Mary. And there was always a difference of opinion about what Mary expected and what Christine expected. And that butting of heads is a byproduct of them having to share a space and share a man, which then just makes me feel sad for the kids. And it makes me sad to think that any of these kids have trauma from anyone in the family. And it also makes me sad that Christine didn't want to be around Mary, but was so poor she couldn't get away from her and was in a system where she was brainwashed to believe that this is where she had to be because this was a godly husband. There's no way around it. And the way that McKelty described it is that there were many explosive fights between Christine and Mary about the children. Many. And Mary is not the kind of woman that hides her feelings, and she's direct with her emotions. And that's an attribute of women that's not appreciated in that cult. They're supposed to keep sweet and shove it all down and not deal with it. And she couldn't do that. I just know that outside of this system, all of them are going to do better. And I hope that they all can get to a point where either they can work through it together or they can move on in a healthy way. But most importantly, I hope the kids get the therapy that they need. And McKelty has talked about how she needs therapy. And all of them need therapy. But if there's trauma and so much trauma in this family, it just begs the question, what benefit is there to the family to continue filming all of this trauma? It just makes me sad for them. Like that, in a way, they were exploited by a network because they were poor and they were offered all these new opportunities that got them out of poverty. But now they're stuck on a wheel, a proverbial wheel, where they're making content, selling their souls for the almighty dollar at the expense of the mental health and the well-being of everyone in the family. I mean, Christine said, none of my kids want to be on the show, and none of my kids watch it. Even if they don't watch it, it's out there and they could find it at any time. And it would be impossible to not see the commentary that's occurring about the family. I don't know how anyone could ignore that within the family, even the person that has the thickest skin. So there are always two sides to a story. I'm sure Mary feels that she has a position here, and I'm sure she probably feels a lot of guilt and shame and frustration. And I'm sure Christine feels like guilt and shame and frustration. And I just hope that everyone collectively in this environment that has gotten out can just realize that all of them are better off out of it, right? And now is time to heal all of them, including the parents, but mostly the kids. So tell me what your thoughts are about these explosive fights and this concept of almost the failures to the kids in this situation. Just, it makes me sad. I mean, Christine talks about not having money and having to work all these side jobs. But if you listen to what McKelty says, it was extreme poverty where they didn't always know where their next meal was going to be, where they didn't have, some of them didn't even have their own beds. It was hard living. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bells so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.